Hello, everyone. So I know we're going to be eating, please continue to eat lunch. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce someone very special. And I want to introduce Ruth Cuadra. I met Ruth 16 years ago. It's been 16 years, Ruth. At the time, Ruth was on the foundation's board of directors. So I knew who she was because of her connection to the foundation. I also knew that Ruth was part of what we called our global support network 16 years ago, where Ruth would reach out and talk to patients who wanted to hear more about her and her story and to be a friend and to share. And over the years, Ruth has always given so graciously to the foundation, giving of herself and telling her story to help inspire other patients that there is life after your diagnosis. So I asked Ruth to come speak today to tell a little bit about her story, and her story started here. Thanks, Ruth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ruth Cuadra, and my story started at City of Hope in 1996. I was diagnosed with aplastic anemia after a just general physical with my regular doctor in Santa Monica. And he called me the day after my tests and said, listen really carefully. I want you to drop everything and go to the hospital, and I'm sending a hematologist to see you. And I had no idea what any of that was about. I was working, I was volunteering, I was the PTA president. My children were 11 and 14, and I was busy. I didn't really have time for this nonsense, but I did what he said. And my husband and I, who were working together at the time, said, we're going and we don't know when we'll be back. And that was the beginning of a journey that brought me to City of Hope for treatment for aplastic anemia. That was my original diagnosis. My blood counts, as my doctor reported on that first day, were hemoglobin of 4 and platelets of 14, which of those of you who are in this journey now know something about how horrible that sounds. But at City of Hope, they took me under their wing right away, and I was treated with ATG and went home to recover. I slept pretty much nonstop for about 6 months at that point. But I did recover my counts enough to go back to work and continue with the life that I had before the diagnosis. But my counts never came back fully. And as you've heard from the doctors today, sometimes that takes a long time. So we waited, and I was continuing to be followed here at City of Hope until a follow-up bone marrow biopsy identified some chromosomal abnormalities in my marrow, which changed my diagnosis from aplastic anemia to myelodysplastic syndrome. So I was at RA, refractory anemia, and not very high risk. So they said, well, basically you have two choices. You can wait for leukemia because we know how to treat that, or you can have a bone marrow transplant. So I was relatively young, too old for aplastic anemia perhaps, but too young for MDS. So they kind of really didn't know what to do with me. Went around and got some second opinions, and everybody said, yes, probably transplant is the right thing to do. And I had a fully matched donor found by the team here at City of Hope in the National Marrow Registry. I had a full 12 of 12 match. And my brother and sister were matches for each other, but not me. So it was clear that the road ahead was for me to have a matched, unrelated donor transplant. I came to the hospital at the end of September in 1998, so just about 2 years after my original diagnosis. I had 11 rounds of full body radiation, a day of chemotherapy, a day of rest, and a transplant on October 6th of 1998. So this past October, I have celebrated 25 years past post-transplant. So part of my reason for being here today to talk to you is to be the hope part of information, support, and hope that the foundation provides. In the early days after my diagnosis, it was in the early days of the internet. So there weren't many ways to find out what the diseases were about, what to do about them, or even to meet another patient. And I know some of you here today are probably meeting patients with a similar diagnosis for the very first time. And that happened to me too. I didn't know anyone even in a city the size of Los Angeles and a hospital the size of City of Hope. It was more than a year before I had met another patient. And that meant a lot to me. And I know it will mean a lot to you as you think about what you've learned and heard today. So from the time of my transplant, I was in the hospital for 7 weeks, which is considerably different from the way most stem cell transplants work in today's world, where you're maybe in the hospital for a week, or maybe you come in on the day of your transplant. They seem like almost outpatient procedures to me now compared to the way it was then. But City of Hope followed me carefully, had relatively few complications. I had some graft versus host disease that went on for a while. And I stayed on immunosuppressive medication for 3 or 4 years until I was finally weaned off everything. And from that point on, I was following up every year with my doctor here. And at 5 years, I had the follow-up bone marrow biopsy that showed no sign of disease, and on we marched. At 10 years, same thing. At 15 years, I was still coming every year. And my doctor finally said to me, you know, you don't have to come anymore. And I looked at my husband, I thought, what? We've just passed into another phase of life. I said to the doctor, do you mean I'm not interesting anymore? And she said, yes, you couldn't go away about your business. So that was 10 plus years ago for me. And I was lucky enough to go back to work, to watch my kids graduate from high school, which isn't something I ever thought I would see. I was probably one of the happiest 50-year-olds you'd ever seen, because I never expected to be 50. And now I've retired from my job, had a wonderful career. I finished 15 years at the Getty in June of 2021. And so I've been out for a few years enjoying life. My husband has just retired, and we just came back from a trip to see the total eclipse in Dallas and managed to see the totality. So from those, very grim days at the beginning with low blood counts and unknown medication and really scary times, we've come full circle. And my way of paying it back is participating with the foundation. So as Lee said, I was on the board of directors. I've been a co-chair of March for Marrow for 15 years. In 2 weeks, as you see from the table there on the brochures and the shirt, that we will have our 15th, thank you, our 15th annual March for Marrow. And during those 15 years, collectively, the teams and the participants have raised about $500,000 for the foundation. So if you're available, if you've made a friend today that you want to walk with, if you want to bring your family, I encourage you to grab a brochure, go to the website, register, and plan to come to Long Beach on April 27th. It's a beautiful location near the Queen Mary. We have a great time. It's a party, it's a walk, it's an important fundraiser, and as we like to say, friend-raiser for the foundation. So I'm happy to chat with any of you individually if you have questions or you want to ask me something about the details of my experience. I'm more than happy to share, and I thank you for listening.